Hello Australia, welcome to My Millennial Money. I'm Glenn James and this is
John Pigeon.
And today we are joined by Laura from Lala Social Club. Welcome back, Laura.
Hello
Laura.
everybody. Hello, John. Good to see you.
Love to have female voices, especially Laura's.
Exactly.
Thank you.
If you are new to M3, Laura is a friend of the podcast. She was very instrumental in, I guess, helping us get the podcast off the ground and making us look good. And she runs a marketing consulting business. She runs a marketing conglomerate. So if you want some details, you can go to lalasocialclub.co.
Yes.
And just tell us what you do, Laura.
So I essentially help small businesses to cut through the noise with their marketing. That's my big thing. So we look at social media, email marketing, website, brand. We kind of help you use all of those aspects to get results online.
Sweet.
Awesome.
So if you're a small business owner or if you're a big business owner and you need some help, check out lalasocialclub.co and we'll put a link in the show notes for everyone. Now, we are an entertainment podcast and I would suggest if you're here for financial advice, you're going to get what you pay for because we're just here to encourage you. We're here to make your day brighter for the hour that you might have us in your ears. And we do this podcast for the M3 community. And you might think, well, how do I become an M3 community member? We like to kind of say, if you listen to the podcast regularly, semi-regularly, if you're just dropping past as a transient listener, g'day and welcome. If you're finding us on YouTube, hello and thanks for watching. And John, we actually can't do these podcasts and, pay a team to help edit and all that without sunsuper.
No, we
can't.
So
do you want to read a little bit about sunsuper's Dream Rewards programs?
I will. Right. So sunsuper's Dreams for a Better World Community Grants program partners with grassroots charities and social enterprises and has helped improve the lives of thousands of Australians, Laura. In 2019-20, Australian charities responded to unparalleled calls for help from those affected by the summer bushfires and the impacts of COVID-19. Dreams for a Better World supported 13 Australian charities with a share of 150 large in grants this year. That's 150,000, Glenn.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which allowed many grassroots causes to continue their vital community programs during difficult times. If you want to know more, visit dreamsforabetterworld.com.au.
So there you go, sunsuper, not just a super fund, but a lot of social enterprise there.
Classy humans, aren't they?
They are. They're banging humans. And we're going to try not to read the paragraph in future. I think we'll just memorize it and talk freely about it.
There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah. So let's talk about how to work smarter, not harder.
Yes.
And it's easy to say, but sometimes harder in practice, okay? And what I've done, and it's going to be a 2-part episode. So this first episode, I'm going to share some of my initial thoughts and we can talk about them. And then next episode, we'll share some of John's thoughts. And they do come at this topic from a different angle. And Laura will jump in, discuss, and she'll have her own ideas for working smarter, not harder.
Yes.
You made notes, Laura?
I've made so many notes.
Awesome.
Now, I kind of was thinking, I've recently purchased a Toyota Prado, okay?
Good decision.
So Pidge has a Prado, I've got a Prado. I went forward driving on the weekend and got mud everywhere, so it's just a bit of a fun car. But Toyota, they are a rock solid manufacturer, okay? And it's interesting when you look at Toyota and particularly Japanese car manufacturers, they are known for having quality products that just don't die, okay? Now, they're reliable, they can just do so many kilometers, and there's just something about that company that stands out all across the world, right?
My father-in-law's got a 1999 Prado. And it's done 370,000. It's done a lap twice, and it's like, man, oh, what a feeling!
Yeah.
Wait, is this podcast actually sponsored by Toyota
Not yet.
as well?
Not yet. And the only recall they've had was on a 1992 Camry just last week, recalling it on the basis that if you've still got one, it's time to get a new one.
Fair enough.
Now, Toyota, and I was doing some research, and I would encourage you, if you're a business owner or if you're working in like some type of role that talks about like product development or anything like that, I did a little bit of research online. But Toyota, the reason they are so good is, they're slower to roll out changes. They're not necessarily a tech leader. So they'll just kind of wait till, that's a proven thing. It's like, yeah, windscreen wipers are here to stay. So, okay, well, we'll put wipers on the car type of thing. Yeah. They've just nailed what they call TQM, which is total quality management. So for those in production and stuff, they might know a bit more about that. And they've got a really lean production system with less moving parts. Now, and I'm just going to read this paragraph that I saw on a blog online. The company established the Toyota Way, a set of business principles in 2001. It is based on Kaizen, continuous improvement. So Kaizen is the word, it's a Japanese word for continuous improvement, basically. And it strives to eliminate waste and overproduction, as well to create a bureaucratic system where any employee can suggest a change where they see fit. So if you're on the production line and your job is to screw in tire pressure valve caps and you see that there's a better way, you can actually give that feedback.
That's cool.
So there is a high value on human participation. There is a constant encouragement for further innovation, consensus and ideas for improvement. The Toyota Way also focuses on long-term improvements rather than the short term. So that's an interesting one as well. And that could be one of the points to work smarter, not harder, have a long game. The two main pillars of the Toyota Way are customer first and respect for people. So I just think the whole Toyota vibe, it's very interesting. Lean production, quality, and there's feedback all through the value chain, I guess, when creating the car. So you can dig deep and you can read stuff online, like Jeep in America, for example. Their focus is probably more on the capitalism, profit, cheaper parts. Let's get this thing happening, baby. Where Toyota, it's like, no, quality, long-term, lean production line. So I guess that's my opening TED talk on working smarter, not harder.
And I'm surprised, as a sophisticated guy like yourself, you've only picked that up, that Toyota's the best brand of car in 2020.
Well, I had known for some time, John, because I don't know if you remember, in 2013 I had a Lexus. So
I didn't know you were in 2013.
So that's another story why I like Lexus, because it's Toyota and Lexus stands for luxury export to the US. Because Toyota wanted to get into the US market in a luxury way.
Right.
So
this isn't a car podcast.
No. But I just love trying to keep up with your cars.
Yes.
Also, I feel like anyone in the M3 community will be like, "What is your new car?" And so that's good. I'm glad you've landed on Toyota. I think that's
it's solid.
It's solid. Also, I feel like it's like the RM Williams maybe of the car world. Quality.
Yeah.
Like over quantity. With RM Williams, for instance, I bought a pair. It was 2 sizes too small, and I put them on and was like, and I wore them. I was like, maybe they're just supposed to feel like this. I wore them, was like, oh my gosh, this is not right. Ended up going down to one of their Sydney stores, and they were like, oh, we'll swap them right here. And I was like, I have worn them though. Like you can see on the sole. And they were like, no worries. No dramas. They totally looked after me in the whole process. And it was like, I'll buy their boots
But
forever.
you can take your socks with you. We don't need to keep
They
those.
didn't want to keep
So
my
I guess
socks.
from a brand perspective, the working smarter is also the RM way or the Toyota way. It's like people first. So is that a way that we can work smarter in our own lives by like valuing people first? I'm not sure. Probably is. But I guess, do you want to have any opening statements, John, on this thesis?
Well, I want to keep it on cars for the moment.
Sure.
Because Ford has this, I suppose, long-winded story back in the day where they had a overnight crew and they had a day crew. And they wanted to maximize their output of both those shifts. Now, what happened was there was this big whiteboard in the warehouse, whatever you want to call
Factory,
it.
if you will.
Yes. And the overnight crew started to put their figure as to how many cars they've pushed out on their shift. So the day crew would come in and say, right, we're going to beat that, right? So quality potentially over quantity. And that went on for years, and Ford were wrapped with that because that was like, oh, we're pushing out more.
No, sorry, you said quality over quantity. Do you mean quantity over quality?
Is that what I said?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you mean the bad side of it?
Well, yeah. More accidents are more errors are going to be made, aren't they? When they're trying to push out more of those.
And I think even if you keep it on the car thing, it's like that. How do you run things? And you can bring this down to your own workstation if you're sitting at a desk or if you're an electrician. Like, how can you make things more streamlined? So different manufacturers will bring in crap from all over the world and have just-in-time delivery and all that, where I believe Toyota isn't as savage in that way. So there's just literally more lean, less moving parts.
Yeah, and I'm ready to rip into this. Let's do it.
So I guess my first point that I've written down is one thing that we can all do, whether you're an employee, whether you're self-employed, whatever walk of life that you are, to work smarter, not harder, which doesn't take much effort, is to transfer your human capital or some of it each week, each month, each whatever, into investments. So I wrote down 10, 15, 20% with a question mark. We all as employees transfer automatically 9.5% of our work into investments. So how can I encourage everybody listening to go, well, I'm going to turn this up a notch and invest 5% of my salary for the long term. So instantly I'm transferring my human capital into the future, and it will never go away until you're 60 years old and you want to draw down on it.
And hopefully it's working for me.
Yeah. So I guess what can you do to transfer your human capital? And that could be, I want to do more hours at work, or I'm going to do the Saturday shift for half a day, and just put that money into an investment account for my future. So that's kind of the first thing that I had. The second one I had was, double down on our strengths. So there's a lot out there, and particularly probably me going through high school and early 20s and all that, there was a thing in our culture that was like, you need to work on your weaknesses. But I think that's rubbish, because I'm always going to be a terrible singer. I'm always going to be a terrible guitar player. I'm not sitting there working on that crap.
Yeah, totally.
So in your business, Laura, so how have you kind of, and not only business, in your life, how have you doubled down on your strengths and potentially outsourced the weakness?
Yeah, I think this is something I have learned along the way, but I think have you guys done Strengths Finder, the test?
I think so.
So they come back to you and they give you your top strengths. Right. And for me, I just was like, great. Mine are really around strategic, futuristic. Maximizer was one of mine. And so in my business, I've found that I lean into those strengths. So I'll be working with people on, okay, how can you grow your business, or how can you maximize, your ad spend, or different things like that within my work. And leaning into those strengths has helped me a lot. One of those strengths is, empathy. And in work, you can still lean into those strengths that you have, whatever your industry is or whatever your work is. But I think for me, I have had to realize when I'm not operating in those strengths, I am doing the people I work with a disservice. I'm also doing myself a disservice because I hate it. So if I am, admin is not something that I love. I don't like it. It's not my strong suit. So I've had to surround myself with a team of people who are like, right, I love this stuff. I'm going to get this done. You know, Jess, who produces the podcast, she's amazing at that. And I think it's building a team around your, like, that complement your strengths. But also I think self-awareness is a big one too. Actually knowing what your strengths are and your weaknesses are so you can cover that.
Absolutely.
How have you doubled down on your strengths over time, John?
Well, I think, first of all, the strength and weakness part is, I was taught the same thing. Work on your weaknesses and then you'll be a more rounded person. And I suppose where that first came for me was in sport. Like you referred to, say, singing, like, do you need to be a good singer for you to run a good business or be a healthy person or run a good life? Like, probably not. Helps in the shower, but doesn't really matter so much. Whereas as a tennis player, if you don't work on your weakness as a backhand, then you're going to be in trouble. You can't employ someone else to do your backhand for you. So in business, it's I agree totally, Laura. Like, you're working on your strengths. Your weaknesses, well, I suck at admin. I don't like it, so I'm going to get someone else in to do it for me. Like, that's the total business approach. But I think a lot of business owners don't do that because they like control. They like to keep their hands on every aspect of the business. So,
Totally.
I didn't really answer your question at all.
No, but that's fine. You never do. But I'm thinking, like, there's a lot of people that listen to the podcast who aren't business owners, who aren't self-employed. So I'm kind of thinking, it's like, in your day job, if you sit at a desk or you work in a factory or you drive a truck or whatever you do, if there's, that one thing that you actually are not good at, and that self-awareness thing comes to mind, because there's a lot of people that think they're good at something and everyone else is going, oh, no, you actually suck.
Totally.
But can you approach your boss and be like, hey, on Thursdays, we have to do this task. I'm just letting you know, I actually, am not great at this task. I think my time in the business would be better spent doing something else. So can you have the discussion?
Yeah, and that's an interesting discussion, because if my dad was here right now, he'd be saying, suck it up and do that job because that's what you've been told to do. Whereas the next generation through is questioning that, saying, well, that's not going to be the best use of my time nor the company's. Yeah. So
I would hypothesize as an employee, like, absolutely your old man would say that, and my grandfather, because you're a lot older than me, so would probably say that. But I think it's that in terms of this wellness factor in our life and employment now, if Nath, the editor here, what up, Nath? Thanks for editing. If he's like, you know what, I really hate editing, I'm like, okay, well, it's your job. So but like, that's a bad example. It's like, I'm your old man. But if he says, look, I really hate
making coffee for you.
No, I make all the coffee around here. If he really hates doing, a 20% of the role, I would rather know so I can then solve that problem, because you'd hate to leave a business on a 20% that you hate doing if you like the rest of the job.
Yeah, but it requires a good mindset from the boss.
Totally.
And it requires trust and transparency for the employee, doesn't it? It's like, well, am I comfortable approaching Glenn and discussing that 20% that I hate with him? Or will he say, well, hang on a minute, he's maybe not the right fit, I'm going to replace Nathan?
Well, maybe in part of this working smarter, not harder, is that if you are working in a toxic workplace.
Yes.
Like, you want to be working smarter. Like, everyone, we all do stuff, every day. Like, if you're a dentist, most of the day you're going to be doing teeth stuff. If you're a plumber, most of the day you're going to be doing drain stuff.
Yeah.
If you're teacher, you're going to be teaching. So we've all got our core thing, but I really think the weaknesses, and if your whole job's a perceived weakness in your mind, maybe it's a full career change.
Yeah.
Totally.
And you'll probably touch on this, but this perceived weakness is also a discussion point, because, like, I don't think I'm a good cook, but I don't like it either. If I actually applied myself, I might be okay at it. Like, but I've got it in my mind that I'm not a good cook.
Yeah.
Well, one of the points that I made here, and it probably leads on to that career thing, and for those who are at university or for our younger listeners who are still at school, you're probably watching on YouTube because a lot of Gen Z watch on YouTube. What up? I would probably say, I heard some old guy say on the radio one day, he was probably a million years old, and his one piece of advice, and I've said this on the podcast before, he's like, don't focus and double down on what you love. Do what you're good at and what you like, because that will have the highest chance of having a successful career in life.
Yeah.
Sure, if you love playing guitar, you love singing, and you turn out to be Chris Martin, all good, but I think that's a small percentage of the population.
Yeah.
And also I think there's a difference between hobbies and work. And I think a lot of the time, particularly millennials, we think that our work defines our meaning of life. And it can, I understand that having some form of purpose attached to your work is really important. But at the same time, sometimes work is work. And sometimes running a business is running a business. And there are moments where it's not all rosy. So right. I think having something external that's I just actually do this for fun and enjoyment and because I love it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you weren't running this as a business, being a marketing guru, would you do that in your spare time as a hobby because you enjoy it?
Yeah, I think it started out for me as I enjoyed the creative side of it. So I loved photography and writing. So I really found that my hobby, I guess, led me to my job. So, but now I'm I need another hobby because that's actually work now. So maybe playing tennis or doing something that's just not.
Well, that's why I bought the Prado, because I needed a hobby because, the podcast was a bit of a hobby outside of work. And now it's not.
Because I would argue with that million-old guy in the sense that generally what you're good at, you enjoy. Because you are good at it, gives you self-confidence, gives you a whole range of things. If you generally, I rarely meet someone that doesn't enjoy something that they're good at.
Yeah, and I think that's, do what you like and what you're good at. I'm talking about that, Nath plays bass and he probably jams with friends and in a garage. That's not paying the bills right now.
No.
So
it could though.
It could, but that's what I'm saying. For I guess we talk about that big rock in your career.
Yeah.
I think you really need to target, working smarter, doing that stuff than working harder doing what you love, which might not pay the bills yet.
Yeah.
Totally.
So
cool.
Another thing that I had written down, and again, this is for those who might be an employee because we do, we're all self-employed here and, I'm self-employed running a podcast, but I have been an employee and I have done stuff like this. And if you're in my team and you're listening to this, I want you to take note. If there's something you have to do more than once, how can we template that?
Totally.
Or at least set up a framework, or just to make that easy, make it a bit more of a habit. So, whether it's you're working on files in the office and you're onboarding a client, can you get some Excel spreadsheet that is the onboarding checklist, and every single file, it comes up and you write the list of things that you got to do and you kind of systemate and automate that task as much as possible.
Is that like when Homer Simpson got that chicken that pecked the keyboard the same time, so he didn't have to be there?
Possibly.
He didn't have to be in the office, just pressed it.
Yeah, that is working smarter, not harder.
That is smarter for Homer, isn't it? Yeah.
But I think that's so true. I think, in business, and I think this applies to, if you are in a corporate role or whatever your job kind of is, if you are doing a task that is repetitive and it happens every other week, what parts of that can you automate, outsource and delegate? So if there are parts of that you go, actually, we can totally make a template, make a system out of this that just we click a button. There are so many project management tools where you click a button, you put them into a stage, that client or that project into a stage, and it actions a bunch of other tasks that could be sent via automated emails. You know, there are so many things that we could be doing to actually make our processes much more streamlined. And then it's also getting good at going, actually, I'm going to outsource that. That's not my strength. I'm going to outsource that. I don't know how much you can do that, you know, within a workplace.
Well, I think it could be that, and this is where, you know, if you really do want to excel or succeed.
Can be
You
one
almost
word.
you almost stuffed up totally
I know.
saying that. That could have been way worse.
If you really want to exceed or excel in your career and in your business, favor follows the active, I believe.
Yeah.
Luck follows the
Totally.
active. If you're living a passive life and just rocking up, doing your thing and going home and not being active and proactive, there will be a big difference with the person that works next to you who's got an active role, okay?
Yeah.
Now, what if, based on that, Laura, you're in your role, you're an employee of a business, and yes, granted, if you work for the government department as a bureaucracy machine, yep, totally might be harder, but working for a smaller business, what if you said, hey, boss, you know, we're doing this every time, okay? What about we set up a little automation thing and, you know, I reckon we could outsource this part of the business and use me as the gatekeeper. So if you're the somebody and you do this, you're like, well, what about we free up time? I'll do a little system and we get maybe 2 contractors to do that task. I'll gatekeep that. And then what will happen is we're using 2 contractors because if one falls over or doesn't happen, we've got redundancy. So the business will keep on ticking on. But it's just that thinking. And I was even thinking, like, I know a lot of hair salons, they might do stuff where they'll use all the hair and, you know, they might package the hair up, put in bags, and then I think some company will take it and do something with it. I'm going beyond the scope of what I know about hair salons, but at some point they've gone, we can get someone to come in and collect the hair to use for oil spill soakers or whatever.
I did not know that happened.
I think so. But yeah, so I challenge the hypothesis that someone might say, I'm just an employee. I can't work smarter in my role. And I really believe if you own that current role, be active in that role, show initiative, working smarter in your role, you'll be amazed what happens in a year's time.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it comes back to the mindset of the individual, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
How they approach it.
Yeah. So I think another example, again, within the employee context, and again, you can use this as a self-employed, JP, Jess, who's working in the team now, she's a bit of a, you know, she does a bit of everything. Okay. So our team now, we're trying to cross-train. So like my example before, if someone is away or gets hit by a bus, we can all step in and cross-train. At the interview, it stood out to me. We had a design job that she sent through and it was really cool. And we're like, geez, that would have taken freaking a year to design. And Jason, who kind of is our, I don't know, he's one of our creative dudes or something. He kind of helped, you know, look for the creatives with me. He asked her, how did you do this? Did you design it in this? And she said, and this was just amazing, and this is the mindset as an employee that you're looking for. She said, I had to do this project, so I knew it would have taken a long time, so I just went and purchased some different assets and used them all. So instead of taking 4 days to design it, she's asked the boss, hey, can I just spend $30 on some stock?
Totally.
I'm making a really bad...
Creative Market or
Yeah.
Fiverr, and where you can buy templates.
Fast track the result.
Totally.
So that's an example of working smarter as
Absolutely.
an employee.
Yeah,
And that really stood out to me as someone who's active thinking.
totally.
And maybe that is one of the point. You've got to change your thinking to be active, to happen to life, not let life happen to you.
No.
If you want to succeed in the workforce and in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know for me, if one of my team approached me and said, hey, I understand the vision of what you're trying to do here and I'm all on board, but this is a sticking point in the process. If someone came to me and said that, I would be like, I love any initiative. I'm like, yes, that's awesome. Tell me what you want to do, and let's make it happen. Because anyone who's thinking has that ownership. I would see it as an ownership thing, and I'm sure Shell and Em would have ways to do that in a way that doesn't condescend or you know come across the wrong way. But I know for me as an employer, I would be like, yes, I so appreciate you doing that, and you tell me how you want it to go, and I will sign off on it, kind of thing. So
it's almost a personality profiling, isn't it? As showing initiative, like
totally
good attitude, show initiative, be a generous person. Like there's some traits that make up all these things that we're talking about.
Yeah, and on the flip side, imagine if someone left your business because they hated their job, their role, or if they
or
were
even
like
that 20% of the role.
Yeah, you'd be like, oh man, I wish I'd have known, because I would have.
That's right.
I would have worked to transition you out. Maybe it's not an immediate overnight thing, but I would have understood, hey, it's better for me to retain you as an employee or as a valued part of the team than for me to go find someone else and teach them the processes. I'd rather make the people on board already stoked and love their job. I don't think employers are thinking, I hope they hate their job.
No,
Generally not.
no.
Generally not, Glenn.
No, sometimes. Punishment. My own mental punishment.
Yes.
I think as well, like, you know, you might be like, oh, this is a bloody money podcast. Why aren't you talking about money? Well, it's like, if you control that person in the mirror, a lot of things get worked out.
Yeah.
Like the money, like...
You're talking about your partner when you see them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's
Like,
what I thought too. Yeah.
Exactly. Because it is such just that mindset of, before I engage in a task, I'm just going to step back and have a bit of a look. I read a book recently, and I forget the one. It might have been Adam Kay, about he was it's a comedy book. It's hilarious, and it's called do you want to talk about something, John, while I'm going to find this book title?
I was just thinking before, it's really, if you're listening there as a business owner, fantastic. This is what you want to do for employees. Be transparent, make yourself easily approached to have a conversation. But if you're sitting there as an employee thinking, well, what's my boss thinking? What do they want out of me? Like, and having that two-way thinking, because I think always, and I go back to sport again, Glenn, as I love to, that coach-player relationship, like, well, what does the coach want out of me? What is the coach's vision? Like, where are we going with this thing?
Yeah.
So the book that I think it was in here, if not, read this anyway, because it's hilarious and there's some good lessons. It's called This Is Going to Hurt, and it's the journal of a doctor called Adam Kay in the UK, journaling all his stuff from going through med school and being a resident and all that in the hospital, and stuff like patient checks in, weird sensation on the tongue, diagnosis, like taste buds, like just the dumb stories of like people going to the ER in the NHS. But I think it was either this book or another one, I might be getting confused, where they did a simulation of an emergency in a hospital, and so had the dummy on the bed. They did some cardiac arrest or something like this, and had all the doctors and the people working on it. And basically the problem was, and I'm loosely paraphrasing this, that the actual machine or something wasn't actually just turned on. So the patient's crashing and all the doctors are just dialing in on, this patient crashing, where it's like there was the one person to actually step back and just do that basic...
Turn the power on.
Is this on? Is this on? And that speaks to that when you come up to a task, before you mindlessly go in and go, I've got to do this task, resuscitate the patient. It's like, okay, let's just step back 2 seconds, have a think, have a look. How can we do this in the most efficient way?
Totally. And I mean, I don't know if you'll touch on this later, Glenn, but the big thing I find, and this would apply to business owners as well as employees, is if you like busy work is the enemy of working smart, I believe. I think that the amount of time we spend on email, the amount of time we spend in Slack channels, team or whatever, teams, it makes us, it kind of stops us from, as you say, stepping back and seeing the big picture and like actually doing deep work and getting those big things done. So while ever you're responding to emails and putting out fires, it's really hard to work smart. It's really hard to get the important but not urgent tasks done. Right. So I think the productivity side of things is a big part.
Well, I think that's taken me a really long time to learn, and just as of very recently, how we're scheduling like the podcast stuff, because, you know, I technically run a business, being the podcast and all the stuff we do. We're now doing kind of quote unquote 2 weeks on recording, 2 weeks off. So we'll record for 2 weeks and then 2 weeks off recording, because once we're sitting here today recording, if we do this day and then in 2 days we do another bit of recording, we actually don't get the flow that we need. Totally. And we don't get that deep work. I think there's a book, Cal Newport or something like that.
Yeah.
It's Google Glenn James book recommendations. It's on there on that page. And he talks about, getting that deep work. We can't actually get the deep work done in the business while we're doing spot fires of recording. Like Nate can't sit there and spend an hour and a half editing. Yeah. If it's like, all right, we've got to press record now and we've got guests coming in. So we've had to move. But it's been really hard for me because the 2 weeks that are quote unquote off of not recording, I feel like I'm not doing anything. So I've had to really relearn how to use that time as creative time, how to do content. Like I was just in Byron Bay recently on that off week, just kind of working from up there and trying to, it looks weird, but we are trying to work smarter with how we do things.
Yeah. And you can often appear busy without being actually influential at all.
The statistic is like, the average employee spends 13 hours a week on email.
Yeah, wow.
It's like crazy when you think about that. So even for me, like things that I have had to implement myself is like, okay, I have an email check-in time. I have an Instagram check-in time because Instagram's part of my job. Yeah. But like we can think we're working, but we're really not. We're just scrolling or we're just kind of doing little tasks, whereas we really, if we want to be valuable employees and if we want to finish projects, like each of us have online courses, you can't do that. Like you really need to dedicate a lot of time and a lot of thought, and it's never going to be urgent. It's always going to be something that falls to the bottom of the pile. So framing your days, I think, is a big one. Like how do you structure your days? For me, I try to theme my days. So client work is Monday, Tuesday.
I thought you meant like Monday's purple.
No.
Tuesday is unicorn and rainbows.
But yeah, I mean, we've already been doing that for ages. I don't know. You guys don't do that?
I think the part 2 of this conversation, it probably will dig down next episode into some of that stuff, because I've seen what John has to say on this stuff.
Yeah.
Stole my notes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
He stole your notes or I stole your notes?
No, he did.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't. They're your bloody notes. Not mine. This is my notes right here. Now, just finishing up on the kind of talking points that I had, if you really want to dig down into that, I'm an employee, but I don't want to be full-time, or you want to start a business, because there are a lot of people that have intentions of doing their own thing one day, side hustles, and how can you have the mindset? So in 2011, I used to go to Google every month at Piermont, and they had this thing called Google Pseudo, and it was an event. They were trying to get the startup community happening in Sydney, and Google put on this free event, I think once a month. And we used to all go down there, and there's just all entrepreneurs everywhere, and it was just the amazing people that you would meet. And their whole thing was, it's like when you're building a business, are you making it scalable and saleable? So how can you make things scalable and saleable? Which is not always possible to sell your own thing, but how can you have recurring revenue and scale in your business and in your life? So you talked about the online courses, Laura. Laura, you've got an online course about branding, marketing. everything for a turnkey business. Okay. Now, that's really good. It's kind of that geese gander type thing. What's good for the geese is good for the gander. Laura, talk to us about what the course is and who it's for.
So it's called My Marketing Playbook, and it's really...
It's like I've slipped an ad into this.
It is like you've slipped an ad into this. So it's...
She was ready for it though.
Yeah.
I was so ready. I'm ready. It's really a course, an online course to help you to get really good at marketing. That's the whole point of it. But it's full of DIY marketing strategies. So it's a lot of the stuff I've worked on with one-on-one clients, and so that you don't have to do, and this maybe falls into the work smarter, not harder. You don't have to find the tools and programs to use. You don't have to like work it out by Googling all this stuff. It's actually a framework that you can follow. You can kind of plug and play your own business into this framework that works, and it has worked for multiple businesses that we've worked with. So again, I think actually upskilling is a way of working smarter.
Yeah, I like it.
And I think that kind of this whole like recurring revenue and scale thing, like that's a recurring revenue for Laura because, you know, it's recurring. You know, it's, well, technically,
Yes.
it's not a membership program, but it is kind of passive, quote unquote, income. Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Now, and it's got scale. So much like John's online course and my online course and the podcast, like we could get another 5,000 listeners tomorrow and possibly be able to charge more for ads, for example, without actually having to change anything. So we've got scale with what we do. And basically another point that I had, which goes to Laura's points with, you know, if you are starting that small business, it's learning from others' mistakes, making huge leaps. So part of when I started my first business, I did learn from like the Google mindset. How do you make things lean? How do you make things scalable?
Yeah.
And I think those huge leaps, they're just more available today, and investing, you know, a couple $100 or however much your course is. How much is it?
It's $299 US.
Yeah. So, you know, under $500 to learn these gold gems that would actually propel you so far. It's actually, that to me is working smarter.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's the same with both of your courses. It's the same thing. It's really you're learning from a specialist a skill that they've honed over a really long time. And so I think that is definitely part of that.
Yeah, and I mean,
being
you know, in our business here, we've got an online course. I don't think Nathan's completed it yet on video editing. Have you? No. So, you know, we buy online courses. You know, Jess and Jess, they've got a course by Chris Do, who's this, you know, design futurist freak in America. So, like, we use online courses here because it's just working smarter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as an individual, what your course, for example, does, even though I haven't seen it, by the sounds of it, it's allowing them to take control of their own situation.
Totally.
They're not. You're not saying go and outsource and go and do this X, Y, Z and you'll be a success. It's actually getting the tools to take control themselves, which is so powerful.
It's the teaching a man to fish kind of way of doing it. Yeah.
So, how can you do whatever you do, be it scalable? So, it kind of all leads into one. It's like how you've got to stop doing things manually. So, can you implement checklists? Can you implement templates? Can you implement stuff that, you know, you can actually get more stuff done at scale without actually changing anything? Because that's ultimately how to work smart.
Yeah.
And I've got two kind of last ones, and this one we'll probably touch on more next episode. For me, like what helps with my productivity is pen and paper, one thing at a time. If I write down things, I just, first one, focused intensity. Multitasking, there's some articles, I think Harvard Business Review online. Multitasking, I've done a podcast express episode on it or an email or something. Multitasking is a bit of a fallacy because you just spread and it's not efficient. And then the last one, you know, there's a lot of people that do stuff online in this day and age, us included. I always kind of get overwhelmed. It's like, we do this podcast. I don't know what to talk about. Like, I get this overwhelmed thing. It's like, all right, well, we'll do the podcast another 3 months and then we'll wrap this up because we're finished. But it's like, I get overwhelmed, but it's like, no, it's user-generated content. We can just go back to the community and say, what do you want us to talk about?
Yeah.
And so we can draw from the community. So in that sense, I work smarter because, one, I don't have to think about stuff. And two, we can actually do what people want.
Yeah, relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's take a short break and we'll come back with the community member of the week and some closing words. All right. Community member of the week. This week it is Hannah. She, get this, John, lives on the central coast of New South Wales. Ooh. So she's a local. So thank you, Hannah, for listening. She's a 27-year-old New South Wales government worker in transport infrastructure.
Okay.
So hopefully their team is making our life easier, not harder.
Transit.
So her financial goal is get out of credit card debt. She's got about $7,000. Reduce the interest being paid on her car loan, which is $37,000. That's a big car. And save for a house deposit, save for emergency, and buy shares with $10K. So, sorry?
Hope it's a Toyota.
Hope it's a Toyota. So she's got a lot of financial goals going on there. What tips would you give her on her financial goals there?
Have a good attitude.
Yeah?
Yeah. Work smarter, not harder. I would say get out of debt as quick as you can. You've got to rid that $7K for a start. Is that what you want me to do?
Yeah.
When we rank these debts, the credit card debt is definitely the worst. So we've got to get rid of that as quick as possible. Don't worry about your savings. I'd probably differ from you a little bit in this. Get a buffer in your life. Get your debt removed. Sort of like run lean until that debt's gone, and then build your buffers up.
Oh yeah, but my buffer, it's just have $2K buffer first.
Yeah, okay.
A mini buffer.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would just say to Hannah, look, the saving emergency and the buying the shares and the house deposit, fantastic, but just get rid of that jargon first. With the $37K, I would say, look, you've got an asset there at least. It's probably getting lower and lower as we talk, but you've got to move forward and build that deposit, I think, first so we can get into some assets. So I wouldn't get rid of the 37.
Okay.
Would you?
It depends. I don't have enough information on her overall situation.
Neither do I.
How's she achieving the goal so far?
The strategy that has one task after another with triggers and dates timeline.
Yeah, well, there you go. So she's got a bit of a plan. And what's her silliest money mistake?
Allowed a car dealership to put me into a financing situation where I didn't have much equity in my previous car loan and now paying both off. So she's rolled negative equity into her car, I think. So basically with car loans, you can sometimes borrow like 110%. And so basically what you do, you're like, I need a new car. And you go into the dealer and they say, we can give you this new car for $30,000. Yeah.
But I'm $7,000 under on my current car. So they'll go, all good. We'll just finance you $37,000 and then you can drive away a new car over 5 years because they'll never give you a 4-year because they want it low as possible. So I don't get my financial advice from a car dealership. Don't know about you guys.
Is it still common? Are they still doing that?
Yeah. It's the Wild West.
Crazy, isn't it?
Any final thoughts on today's episode, Laura?
No, I think it's all really good. I'm excited to get into the practical elements of how to do that, how to actually implement it into your work life. But it's,
Love it.
Nothing else to add.
Yeah.
Sweet.
All right. It's been good.
Thanks, guys. And remember, you can follow us on Instagram. You can join the Facebook group. Remember, we've got My Millennial Career, which is a career podcast. We've got Gen Z Money for under 24s. We've also got My Millennial Property, which John and Emily take care of that. So thanks for listening today. We'll see you guys soon.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.